Welcome back, everybody. On your Do Now, I wanted you to explain some of your freedoms you have in the United States. We're the land of the free. What are those freedoms? What are some freedoms you know of? We're starting a new unit today. We'll be doing this for about 3 weeks, and it's all about our rights and freedoms. What sort of protections do we have? What sort of things is the government supposed to be defending for us? What are these rights and freedoms? So, we're going to talk about what freedoms we have as citizens or as people who just happen to be living in the United States. Um, how do these rights and freedoms prevent tyranny? A right is something that you are born to get, to have, that the government is not allowed to take from you. Then we're going to talk about when is it okay for the government to maybe limit your rights? Do we have them in full all the time, or is there situations or occasions where you don't get all of your rights? And when is that okay, and when is it not okay? It's going to be similar to our to what extent type questions, where I'm not saying is it okay for them always to take away all of your rights or never do it. When is it okay to limit some of the rights, and when would you be okay with it? So we'll start with this idea of amendments. This is a phrase you've probably heard: First Amendment, Second Amendment. An amendment is an addition or a change. And when we say the amendments, we're talking about the addition or changes to the Constitution. So they wrote out a plan for the Constitution, how the government would work. But a lot of people looked at that and said, I don't think that prevents tyranny enough. And some of you said that on your test last week. But this fear that, like, the Constitution, yeah, we got all these systems in place, but you could still abuse the people. So they created these amendments. They added on to the Constitution. And when you do this, it's kind of like a super law. It's kind of adding to the Constitution. It's not a normal law, right? There's laws that say you can't jaywalk. There's laws that say you have to pay your taxes. These are above those laws. These are constitutional laws, right? That you cannot violate, you cannot get rid of. And they are sort of two categories. One, they are freedoms and rights that people have that need to be written out, that the government cannot take these away. Specific things that the government cannot take. Um, or they're the second category. It's a change to the way the Constitution works, change to the way the government functions. All right, so we'll look at examples of both of these. Most of what we're going to talk about this unit is going to be the first part, the freedoms and protections. So the first, when the Constitution was written, people are still worried about tyranny and abuse. So they wrote out a list of important rights and freedoms they don't want taken away. These are called the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights were the first 10 amendments. They all got added at the same time, right? Because most states and people would not accept the Constitution without the Bill of Rights. So they were added together. And we call the first 10 the Bill of Rights, and it's a list of important rights and freedoms. It's important to note we have other rights besides the ones that are written in this, and we can make more amendments later and add more rights and freedoms if we choose. That's open, that our Constitution is open to being changed. Here's a picture of the Bill of Rights. Again, this is a really short document. It's one page, and articles are just the list of different amendments that they're adding and the different rights they're trying to protect. Over the next few weeks, we're going to go through some of these and a few others. All right, so we'll do some questions on the Pear Deck today. So if you want to pause this video and explain to me what amendments are, so teach me in your own words, give an example. So we all can understand that rights are important, right? Our freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the right to bear arms, these are all important rights that were put into the Constitution. But are they always absolute? Right? You have freedom of speech. Are you always allowed to say whatever you want, wherever you want? You always protected? In this unit, we're going to talk about, well, yeah, you have this right, but sometimes you don't. Sometimes it can be limited. All right, so we're going to have to figure out, where is that line? All right, each person has a different opinion. We want to know where it actually is. Where does the government say it is? But where do you think it should be? For you, when is it okay to take away a freedom and when isn't? So again, on the Pear Deck, put your thoughts so far. What are you thinking about when should the government be allowed to take away a right? You can pause this video. So everyone's got their own perspective. We're going to start with an example around COVID. Right? During COVID, we were in a global pandemic. Everyone said we're in this great crisis, this emergency situation. We need to take away some of your rights to protect people's lives and to stop the spread of a disease. And most of us admitted that, like, well, yeah, that makes sense. We need to save lives. We should limit our freedoms. But how much? How much would you be willing to give up? All right, and everyone's got a different perspective on this. So we're going to look at an example. I want you to think of like which restrictions are you okay with? Which sort of laws would you be okay with if we're still back in like 2020, the height of the pandemic? All right. So would you be okay with everyone being required to wear a mask? If you want to go to a public building, you want to go anywhere outside your house and you're inside, you have to wear a mask. I mean, that's taking away your freedoms. It's government telling you what you have to wear and on your face. That's a pretty big restriction of rights. Are you okay with that? If you're okay with that, are you okay with indoor restaurants and indoor non-essential businesses being closed? I mean, if you want to run a business inside that's not really necessary, we should close it down because it's going to stop the spread of disease. Now, those businesses can still run virtual, right? Still deliver products, but nothing in person. Are you okay with limiting outdoor gatherings? No groups of more than 10 people. If you're okay with that, are you okay with limiting all gatherings? Are we closing all non-essential businesses? The only thing that's open are like grocery stores and medical places, the bare necessities. Are you okay with a stay-at-home order where you're not allowed outside your house and everything is going to be delivered by the military? All these things are similar, right? They're taking away your rights with the hope of saving lives. Where do you draw the line, though? At what point are you saying that's gone too far? You can't take away that right from me, right? Because some people, as you know, during the COVID, wouldn't even do the first one. They said, hey, you're taking away my rights. You can't make me wear a mask. And there's some people who said, like, I'm okay with all the way to 4 or 5. Right? So where would you limit it? So again, on the Pear Deck, write your thoughts. Where are you okay with taking away people's rights and freedoms for a health pandemic? Pause this video. Now let's try applying this to something like gun rights. Right? The Constitution says you have the right to own a firearm. Are you okay with the government taking away some of those freedoms, your right to own weapons? Right? Are you okay with the government taking away your right to own a nuke? Most of us are probably okay with that. I don't need everybody in the city or country to have a nuclear weapon. That sounds terrible. Right? Are you okay with the government making it illegal for you to own a fighter jet? What about owning tanks? What about automatic weapons? What about any firearms at all? Even hunting rifles, small pistols, right? Everyone's got different lines of what they were willing to do. Some people, you know, are working to try and get rid of all laws and get rid of the Second Amendment. Some people say, no, I should be able to have whatever firearm I want and say they're okay with getting away nukes, but not everything, right? So we all have different ideas. What do you think about that, restricting gun rights? When are you okay with the government taking away that right or freedom from people? So there's an issue here when we talk about limiting rights and freedoms. There's a concern. There's people who say the government shouldn't do it ever for any reason, any excuse at all. And the argument they say is this: it's called the boiling frog. So the deal is like if you took a frog and threw it in a pot of boiling water, it would freak out, right? You're putting it in hot water, it's going to jump out immediately. But if you take that same frog and you put it in a pot of water that slowly rises in temperature, it gets closer and closer to boiling, the frog's never going to notice. And the fear is that if you take away rights slowly, piece by piece, no one notices. And before too long, you're at the point where the water's boiling, where they've taken away rights and freedoms that you would never have accepted, right? Think about before the pandemic. If someone said, all right, you can't go to school unless you're wearing a mask and we check your temperature before you're allowed in the building. We'd say, oh, what are you talking about? Absolutely not. But through the course of the pandemic, we got accepting of that. We were willing to put up with it, just like the frogs willing to put up with a slow rise in temperature of water, but not the instant one. Another way of calling it like a slippery slope, right? As you start limiting freedoms, you get closer and closer. You get to the point where it's almost harder to go backwards. It's easier to fall, right? So as you take away rights and freedoms, it starts to get easier and easier to the point where giving those freedoms back almost becomes too hard. All right? So, from a philosophical way, America says you're born with rights. You have the freedom of speech. The government doesn't give it to you. You were born with it, and the government shouldn't be allowed to take it away. Right? It's their job to protect it for you, to make sure you get it. Just like they protect your life from terrorists, criminals, they should also be protecting your rights and freedoms. So after thinking about all this, like, can you come up with another answer to when is it okay to limit rights and freedoms?